In the heart of a quiet, quaint town, nestled between the misty hills and shrouded in an eerie silence, there stood an abandoned mansion. For years, the locals had whispered tales of the house's dark history, and it had become a place of both fear and fascination. It was a house that had remained untouched for decades, and its secrets lay dormant in the dust-covered corners of time. On a cold, moonless night, a group of paranormal investigators led by the intrepid journalist Sarah gathered outside the mansion's towering wrought iron gates. Sarah was known for her relentless pursuit of the unknown, and she had heard the whispers of the house's spectral inhabitants for years. She believed the time had come to confront the chilling legends head-on. The group entered the mansion with cameras and recording equipment, determined to capture evidence of the paranormal. They moved through the dark hallways, their footsteps echoing eerily as they explored room after room, their breaths visible in the frigid air. As they ventured further into the heart of the mansion, they stumbled upon a room filled with old photographs and handwritten letters. The photographs depicted a family that had once called the mansion home, but the letters revealed a story of tragedy and despair. The family had been plagued by misfortune, their lives spiraling into madness and darkness. Just as the investigators were piecing together the history of the mansion, the cameras began to malfunction. Screens flickered with static and eerie whispers filled the air. It was as though the spirits of the past were trying to communicate their tormented tale. Sarah's determination only grew stronger. She pressed on, undeterred by the supernatural forces at play. The group ventured deeper into the house, descending into the basement where an unsettling chill hung heavy in the air. In the dim light, they saw the outlines of strange symbols etched into the walls, symbols that appeared to have been drawn in blood. As they continued to investigate, they heard disembodied voices whispering unintelligible words. Their flashlights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. It was clear that something malevolent was watching, and it was not pleased with their intrusion. Suddenly, one of the investigators let out a blood-curdling scream. His camera captured a shadowy figure lurking in the corner of the room, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly malevolence. The entity seemed to materialize out of thin air before vanishing just as quickly. The investigators scrambled to escape the basement, but the mansion had other plans. Doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. The temperature plummeted, and a deafening, otherworldly shriek reverberated through the house, causing the walls to tremble. Desperation set in as they tried to force their way out, but the mansion seemed to be a living, breathing entity, intent on keeping them within its sinister embrace. It was as though the very walls were closing in, ready to claim them as the latest victims of its tragic history. The investigators fought to survive, using every ounce of their strength to confront the malevolent forces that had been unleashed. In the end, some escaped with their lives, forever haunted by the chilling events they had witnessed. But Sarah, the fearless journalist, remained trapped within the mansion, her determination and curiosity leading her to a terrifying fate that would become yet another part of the mansion's dark and chilling history. And so, the abandoned mansion continued to stand as a silent sentinel, its secrets preserved in the chilling footage captured by the investigators' malfunctioning cameras. The house, with its tragic past and malevolent spirits, remained a place of fear and fascination, waiting for the next group of curious souls to unlock its terrifying mysteries. The setting sun cast a warm, golden hue over the vast cornfields that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was harvest season in the small farming town of Millville, and the air was filled with the sweet, earthy scent of ripe corn. However, beneath the idyllic surface, a chilling secret lurked. In the heart of Millville, there stood an old, dilapidated barn known as the Harvest House. Its history was shrouded in mystery, with the townsfolk whispering tales of strange occurrences and eerie phenomena that had plagued the place for generations. It was the year 1963, and two best friends, Sarah and Tom, had heard the rumors about the Harvest House for years. They were known as the most adventurous kids in town, always up for a dare. On this fateful autumn evening, with a full moon illuminating the cornfields, they decided to uncover the truth once and for all. With flashlights in hand, they ventured into the cornfields, their footsteps rustling through the tall, dry stalks. The moonlight danced on the corn leaves, casting eerie, shifting shadows. The whispers of the breeze seemed to carry strange, otherworldly voices that sent shivers down their spines. After a seemingly endless trek through the corn maze, they reached the harvest house, its rotting wood creaking ominously in the night. The door was partially ajar, as if beckoning them inside. With a mixture of dread and determination, they stepped in. Inside, the barn was filled with antiquated farming equipment, their rusty forms looming like silent sentinels. Cobwebs hung like drapes, and the air was thick with a musty, oppressive humidity. As they cautiously explored, the barn seemed to shift and change. Its dimensions distorted, and corridors appeared where none should have been. The friends heard faint, mournful cries in the distance, and an overpowering sense of sorrow gripped them. They followed the eerie sounds through twisting passageways until they came upon a haunting sight. In a dimly lit chamber, they found an old, rusted threshing machine, and surrounding it were the spectral forms of ghostly farmers, their faces etched with pain. Sarah and Tom gasped in horror, realizing they had stumbled upon a nightmarish scene of the past. These apparitions were the trapped souls of farmers who had met a gruesome end in a cornfield accident many years ago. The spirits toiled endlessly, their spectral hands pushing the threshing machine, their wails a chilling testament to their eternal suffering. In their desperation to escape, the two friends inadvertently released the tormented souls from their spectral servitude. The harvest house quaked and groaned as the trapped spirits dissolved into the night, their mournful cries echoing through the cornfields. A dreadful silence descended, and the barn returned to its rotting, abandoned state. Sarah and Tom fled the harvest house, but the weight of their actions and the harrowing sights they had witnessed stayed with them. The haunting specters were gone, but the cornfields would forever bear the scars of their dark history. As they emerged from the corn maze and the moon dipped below the horizon, they looked back at the now forlorn harvest house. The once secret terrors of Millville had been laid bare, a stark reminder that the past's dark secrets were sometimes best left undisturbed, even in the most tranquil of settings. The wind howled through the dark streets of Hollowbrook on Halloween night. The town was known for its long history of eerie tales and unsettling legends, but none was more chilling than the story of Michael and his girlfriend, Eliza. Michael was a young man with a love for Halloween. He adored the spooky ambiance, the costumes, and the sense of escapism that the holiday provided. Every year, he and Eliza would prepare meticulously for the annual Halloween party, choosing their costumes and decorations with great enthusiasm. But this year was different. Eliza had passed away in a tragic accident just a few months before, leaving Michael shattered and alone. He was determined to honor her memory by attending the Halloween party they had always enjoyed together. As he donned his costume, an elaborate skeleton suite that he knew she would have loved, he couldn't help but feel her absence acutely. Eliza had always been the life of the party, the one who embraced the spooky spirit of Halloween with unbridled enthusiasm. The party was in full swing as Michael arrived at the large Gothic mansion where it was held. As he entered the dimly lit, cobweb-draped entrance, a sense of unease settled over him. The partygoers seemed to revel in the macabre, their laughter and costumes taking on an eerie, almost sinister quality. Michael mingled with the guests, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Eliza's spirit was with him, watching over his shoulder. As the night wore on, the revelry became more frenzied, and the mansion seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Michael retreated to a quieter part of the mansion, a dimly lit library lined with dusty old books. It was a place of relative solitude, away from the madness of the party. But as he gazed at the antique mirror that adorned one wall, he couldn't escape the feeling that Eliza was there, just out of sight. It was when he saw her reflection in the mirror that his heart skipped a beat. Eliza stood there, as vivid as ever, her eyes filled with sorrow. She was dressed in her favorite Halloween costume, a ghostly bride, the very one she had worn the last time they had celebrated Halloween together. "Michael," she whispered, her voice a faint echo from the beyond. "Why did you come here? You should have stayed away." He reached out to touch the mirror, to feel her presence once more, but his hand passed through the glass as if it were nothing more than an illusion. The room grew cold, and the lights flickered ominously. Eliza's form began to distort in the mirror, her image twisting and contorting into something monstrous. Her once loving eyes turned malevolent, and her ghostly gown became tattered and blood-stained. She began to wail, a mournful cry that pierced Michael's soul. Panicked, he stumbled back from the mirror, but Eliza's reflection remained, taunting him with its grotesque transformation. The library seemed to close in around him, the walls lined with portraits of long-dead ancestors who stared down at him with accusing eyes. As the night wore on, Michael's descent into madness continued. He saw Eliza's ghostly figure everywhere, in the flickering candles, in the haunting music, and in the leering faces of the partygoers. Her voice whispered in his ear, a tormenting lament that spoke of betrayal and sorrow. In his terror, Michael fled from the mansion, but the town itself seemed to conspire against him. The streets twisted and turned, leading him in endless circles, and the moon hung low in the sky, its pale light casting eerie shadows that danced around him. Desperate and disoriented, he stumbled into a forgotten cemetery at the edge of town. The gravestones loomed like silent sentinels, and the night was filled with the cries of distant, unseen creatures. Eliza's ghostly figure appeared once more, her spectral hand reaching out to him, beckoning him to join her in the eternal shadows. In his final moments, Michael fell to his knees, his sanity shattered and his spirit broken. He felt Eliza's cold, ghostly touch on his cheek as the world around him dissolved into darkness. The Halloween party, with all its macabre revelry and unsettling spirits, had claimed him as its own, a victim of the haunting power of the holiday. To this day, the legend of Michael and Elisa is told in hushed tones in Hollowbrook. It serves as a chilling reminder that on Halloween night, the boundary between the living and the dead can blur, and the spirits of lost loved ones may return to claim those who dare to cross into the realm of the supernatural. On the night of Halloween, a full moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the town of Hollowsville. For months, the town had been buzzing with anticipation for the grand Halloween party at the Hollow Oak Mansion, an abandoned and decrepit estate known for its dark history. 4 couples, longtime friends, were particularly excited about this year's event. They had heard the legends surrounding the mansion, the tales of unexplained disappearances, mysterious noises, and eerie apparitions. But the allure of a Halloween party at the Hollow Oak Mansion was too enticing to resist. The couples arrived in style, dressed in elaborate costumes that ranged from vampires to classic horror movie characters. They parked their cars on the overgrown driveway, surrounded by dense woods, and made their way to the ominous entrance of the mansion. The moment they crossed the threshold, the air grew heavy with dread. The flickering candles lining the grand hallway cast elongated shadows that danced on the peeling wallpaper. A chill seeped into their bones as they explored the sprawling labyrinthine mansion, each room more unsettling than the last. As the evening unfolded, the couples mingled with other guests, their laughter and footsteps echoing through the dimly lit halls. The grand ballroom, adorned with tarnished chandeliers and moth-eaten drapes, was the centerpiece of the party. But as the hours ticked away, the atmosphere in the mansion grew increasingly unsettling. It was Claire, one of the partygoers, who first noticed it. A mournful wailing sound that seemed to emanate from the depths of the mansion. She turned to her husband, Mark, and whispered, "Do you hear that? It sounds like someone is crying." Mark listened carefully, and indeed the eerie sound of sobbing filled the air. The other couples had also caught wind of it, and they exchanged uneasy glances. Together, they decided to follow the source of the haunting cries, their curiosity piqued. The wails led them to a decaying library, its shelves lined with dusty, forgotten tomes. In the center of the room stood a grand, ornate mirror, its surface dark and foreboding. In front of the mirror, a spectral figure wept, her pale, translucent form clad in a blood-stained wedding gown. As the friends stared in terror, the ghostly bride turned toward them, her eyes filled with torment. She beckoned them closer, her voice a haunting whisper that spoke of love, betrayal, and unspeakable tragedy. The tale of her ill-fated wedding and the gruesome events that followed chilled the friends to the bone. The bride, it turned out, had been married to the mansion's owner, a cruel and twisted man. Her wedding night had ended in a gruesome murder at his hands, and her spirit had been trapped in the mansion ever since. The mansion itself was cursed, and the apparitions of its tormented residents haunted those who dared to enter. Story 2. The friends, gripped by fear and empathy, vowed to help the tormented bride find peace. She begged them to retrieve her wedding ring, which her husband had hidden away as a cruel reminder of their unholy union. The couples embarked on a nightmarish journey through the mansion's maze of shadowy corridors, encountering vengeful spirits and witnessing horrific scenes from the mansion's dark history. It was a harrowing ordeal that tested their courage and strained their relationships. Eventually, they found the hidden chamber where the wedding ring was kept. But as they reached for the ring, the malevolent presence of the mansion intensified. The friends were trapped, their escape blocked by an unseen force. The apparitions closed in, their ghostly forms twisting and writhing with anger. Just when it seemed that all was lost, Claire remembered an old Halloween tradition she had heard about as a child. The power of love and unity could dispel malevolent spirits. The friends clasped hands and with unwavering determination recited their love for one another. The words of love echoed through the mansion, causing a blinding burst of light. The vengeful spirits were cast back, their wails and cries dissipating into the night. The friends were released from the mansion's malevolent grip, and the ghostly bride, with tears of gratitude in her eyes, finally found peace. As they emerged from the cursed mansion, they couldn't help but feel a sense of connection and camaraderie that had been forged in the crucible of terror. They knew that the haunted tales of Hollow Oak Mansion would remain with them forever, a testament to the enduring power of love and friendship in the face of the supernatural. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the friends returned to the town of Hollowsville, forever changed by their harrowing Halloween experience, a story to be shared and retold for years to come. The setting sun cast a warm, golden hue over the vast cornfields that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was harvest season in the small farming town of Millville, and the air was filled with the sweet, earthy scent of ripe corn. However, beneath the idyllic surface, a chilling secret lurked. In the heart of Millville, there stood an old, dilapidated barn known as the Harvest House. Its history was shrouded in mystery, with the townsfolk whispering tales of strange occurrences and eerie phenomena that had plagued the place for generations. It was the year 1963, and two best friends, Sarah and Tom, had heard the rumors about the Harvest House for years. They were known as the most adventurous kids in town, always up for a dare. On this fateful autumn evening, with a full moon illuminating the cornfields, they decided to uncover the truth once and for all. With flashlights in hand, they ventured into the cornfields, their footsteps rustling through the tall, dry stalks. The moonlight danced on the corn leaves, casting eerie, shifting shadows. The whispers of the breeze seemed to carry strange, otherworldly voices that sent shivers down their spines. After a seemingly endless trek through the corn maze, they reached the harvest house, its rotting wood creaking ominously in the night. The door was partially ajar, as if beckoning them inside. With a mixture of dread and determination, they stepped in. Inside, the barn was filled with antiquated farming equipment, their rusty forms looming like silent sentinels. Cobwebs hung like drapes, and the air was thick with a musty, oppressive humidity. As they cautiously explored, the barn seemed to shift and change. Its dimensions distorted, and corridors appeared where none should have been. The friends heard faint, mournful cries in the distance, and an overpowering sense of sorrow gripped them. They followed the eerie sounds through twisting passageways until they came upon a haunting sight. In a dimly lit chamber, they found an old, rusted threshing machine, and surrounding it were the spectral forms of ghostly farmers, their faces etched with pain. Sarah and Tom gasped in horror, realizing they had stumbled upon a nightmarish scene of the past. These apparitions were the trapped souls of farmers who had met a gruesome end in a cornfield accident many years ago. The spirits toiled endlessly, their spectral hands pushing the threshing machine, their wails a chilling testament to their eternal suffering. In their desperation to escape, the two friends inadvertently released the tormented souls from their spectral servitude. The harvest house quaked and groaned as the trapped spirits dissolved into the night, their mournful cries echoing through the cornfields. A dreadful silence descended, and the barn returned to its rotting, abandoned state. Sarah and Tom fled the harvest house, but the weight of their actions and the harrowing sights they had witnessed stayed with them. The haunting specters were gone, but the cornfields would forever bear the scars of their dark history. As they emerged from the corn maze and the moon dipped below the horizon, they looked back at the now forlorn harvest house. The once secret terrors of Millville had been laid bare, a stark reminder that the past's dark secrets were sometimes best left undisturbed, even in the most tranquil of settings. In the small, isolated town of Blackthorn, nestled deep within the thick forests of the Pacific Northwest, there stood an abandoned church that had long been the subject of whispered tales and chilling legends. St. Agnes's Chapel, they called it, a crumbling relic from a bygone era shrouded in an aura of dread and foreboding. Local legend had it that the church had been cursed since its inception, built upon a cursed burial ground by a deranged pastor. The stories spoke of unsettling occurrences, strange apparitions, unexplainable sounds, and those who dared enter never returned the same. The chapel was a place where time itself seemed to stand still, and its dark history weighed heavily upon the land. One moonless night, as a thick fog descended upon Blackthorn, a group of adventurous teenagers decided to investigate the eerie tales that had plagued their childhood. There was Emily, the determined leader of the group, Mark, the skeptical yet curious one, Lisa, the timid but always up for a challenge, and Daniel, the reckless thrill-seeker. Armed with flashlights and their shared bravado, they ventured into the dense woods, guided only by the faint glimmer of the abandoned chapel's steeple through the mist. As they approached, a heavy silence enveloped them, and the feeling of being watched grew increasingly oppressive. The church itself appeared even more menacing up close. Its once stalwart stone walls were now covered in moss and vines, and the windows were shattered, leaving only empty black voids in their wake. The group hesitated but pressed on, driven by their curiosity and desire to debunk the ominous tales. The moment they stepped through the shattered doorway, a frigid wind blew through the chapel, extinguishing their flashlights. Panic set in as darkness surrounded them, and the unsettling sound of whispering voices filled the air. A flickering, pale light suddenly appeared at the far end of the chapel, casting eerie shadows upon the walls. As they approached the source of the light, they stumbled upon a decaying altar adorned with grotesque symbols. Their terror escalated when they realized the light came from an old, blood-red candle that inexplicably burned with an unearthly flame. Before their eyes, ghostly figures began to materialize, staring at them with hollow eyes filled with unspeakable anguish. Emily screamed, her terror echoing through the chapel, while Mark urged them to leave immediately. The others, paralyzed by fear, hesitated as the ghostly figures advanced, their footsteps echoing like the tolling of a death knell. Desperation finally fueled their flight from the chapel, but as they rushed out, a malevolent laughter pursued them, a sinister mocking sound that seemed to emanate from all directions. Once back in the forest, they paused to catch their breath, their hearts still pounding in their chests. The realization that they had unwittingly set free the restless spirits of St. Agnes's chapel gnawed at their souls. They knew that they had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. From that night forward, the town of Blackthorn whispered new tales about the church, stories of the cursed souls who roamed the forest, exacting their revenge on any who dared to enter. The legend of St. Agnes's chapel became even more chilling, a reminder to all who heard it that some places are best left abandoned, their secrets buried forever in the dark recesses of the past. The coastal town of Harmony Cove was known for its breathtaking cliffs, picturesque beaches, and a lighthouse that had guided sailors safely for generations. However, it was also known for something else, a chilling legend of a lighthouse that mysteriously vanished during a violent storm, taking its keepers with it. It was the year 1937, and Lily, an adventurous young woman with a fascination for the paranormal, decided to explore the secrets of Harmony Cove. She'd heard the haunting tales from her grandmother and was determined to uncover the truth. Her friend Alex, an amateur historian, agreed to accompany her. On a foggy evening, they embarked on their quest. The lighthouse sat atop a treacherous cliff, its beam of light having been extinguished for decades. The wind howled and the sea roared as they made their way up the winding path that led to the cliff's edge. The air was heavy with the scent of salt and seaweed. The lighthouse loomed before them, its black silhouette standing stark against the moonlit sky. The stories of its disappearance were riddled with mystery. Some said the lighthouse had been claimed by the sea during a massive storm, while others claimed it had been taken by supernatural forces. Lily and Alex were determined to uncover the truth. They entered the lighthouse, and the air inside was thick with a sense of foreboding. The walls were covered in a thick layer of salt, and the wooden floors creaked with each step. As they climbed the narrow spiral staircase to the top, the sound of the howling wind grew more intense, and the walls seemed to close in around them. When they reached the lantern room, they found the mechanism that had once held the beacon. It had been dismantled and left in disrepair. The room was suffused with an otherworldly glow as a spectral figure materialized before them, a lighthouse keeper in his ragged uniform. The ghostly keeper spoke of the night the lighthouse vanished. He explained how they had tried to keep the light burning during the storm, but an otherworldly force had torn the lighthouse from its foundation and sent it crashing into the sea, taking the keepers with it. They had been cursed to wander the lighthouse, eternally seeking to relight the beacon. Lily and Alex listened in awe and terror, realizing that they had uncovered a dark secret. The spectral keeper implored them to help break the curse by finding the missing lantern and returning it to the lighthouse. The two friends agreed, setting out on a perilous journey that would take them to the depths of the ocean. Their quest led them to an underwater cave, where they discovered the lantern amidst the wreckage of the lighthouse. As they brought it to the surface, the sea roared and thrashed, as if resisting their efforts. With sheer determination, they reassembled the lantern and returned it to its rightful place in the lighthouse. As the lantern's light pierced the night, the ghostly keepers let out a collective, mournful cry, their figures fading into the ether. The lighthouse, once vanished, now stood strong and steadfast on the cliff's edge. The curse had been broken. Lily and Alex returned to Harmony Cove as heroes, their courage celebrated by the townspeople. The legend of the vanishing lighthouse was no longer a haunting tale, but a testament to the power of bravery and determination in the face of the unknown.
Part 1. The Attraction Beckons. In the quiet, suburban neighborhood of Oak Ridge, there was a house that, for the vast majority of the year, remained as inconspicuous as any other. It blended into the community with its modest facade, hiding its true nature until October arrived. For a fleeting 2-year period, the house transformed into a pop-up haunted attraction that drew thrill-seekers from all over the region. Unofficially known as Haunted Hill Housey, the attraction earned its peculiar moniker due to an oddly placed sign procured from a nearby party city. planted in front of what was essentially a grassy patch that was designated as a parking area. The sign added a touch of the macabre, spelling out the attraction's name in deliberately exaggerated and misspelled letters. It was this sign that beckoned people, enticing them to enter the mysterious world of Haunted Hill Housey. The parking area, more symbolic than practical, came to life each October, with the grass serving as the only parking space. This year marked the attraction's last hurrah, the end of an era that had entertained and frightened guests for 2 memorable years. It was during this farewell season that our story takes place. Part 2, The Night of Discovery. Our tale revolves around 4 friends, Matt, Michael, Eddie, and our protagonist. They ventured to the Haunted Hill Housey on a chilly Thursday night. The uniqueness of college life allowed them to have Fridays off, making it the ideal time for a visit, as the attraction would be less crowded than the weekends. Their journey to the house was uneventful, and as they arrived, they couldn't help but notice the absence of a line at the ticket stand. Even the line at the entrance was surprisingly short, with just a handful of people ahead of them. The anticipation grew with every step, but an unexpected twist awaited them as they reached the entrance. Only one person was allowed inside at a time. It was a perplexing development, one that they assumed would intensify the fear factor. With a touch of humor and some reluctance, they pushed Michael to lead the way. The tension in the line mounted as they realized they'd be left in suspense, not knowing what lay ahead. Part 3, A World of Fear. As our friends entered the attraction, they found themselves enveloped by darkness. The path was illuminated mainly by small, flickering lights that cast eerie shadows on the gruesome props, which included mutilated corpses and horrifying scenes. Actors in terrifying costumes would emerge sporadically, sending shocks of fear through the group. Each jump scare took them by surprise, and the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. However, things took a disturbing turn when our protagonist, while navigating a dark hallway, felt a presence behind them. A tall figure emerged from the shadows, pushing them further down the corridor. Initially, they thought it was part of the act, but the fear escalated as the figure's intentions remained unclear. The pushing ceased, and a door closed behind them, leaving our protagonist alone in the darkness. The realization that this was not part of the attraction sent shivers down their spine. With caution, they took out their phone against the rules and turned on the flashlight. What they saw in the dimly lit room was a tall figure dressed entirely in black. With a face mask covering half their visage, the figure was chillingly silent. As minutes passed, the situation remained unnerving. No one came to progress them through the attraction. This wasn't part of the act. Something was very wrong. Our protagonist, who hadn't set foot in a haunted house since childhood, began to panic. The darkness was suffocating and the silence was deafening. Finally, they decided to use their phone to navigate back through the attraction, but the experience had been profoundly unsettling. They were haunted by the encounter with the enigmatic figure and its ominous presence. Part 4, Confronting the Unknown. Emerging from the attraction, our protagonist rejoined their friends and reported the disturbing incident to the staff. A fellow college student had posted on Facebook about her own horrifying experience at the same haunted house. It was an incident that bore eerie similarities to what our protagonist had gone through. She had been assaulted by someone who seemed to have infiltrated the attraction, raising questions about its security. The story spread like wildfire, and the attraction quickly became a subject of controversy and scandal. The victim pressed charges against the owner, alleging negligence in providing adequate security. The staff maintained that the assailant didn't work for the attraction, but the damage was done, and the attraction was shut down that month. The unsettling events of that night left an indelible mark on our protagonist. It was a night they would never forget, one that would forever make them wary of haunted house attractions and remind them of the darkness that could lurk in the most unexpected places. This tale serves as a chilling reminder of the fine line between thrills and danger, and how the sinister can sometimes creep into the most seemingly innocent experiences. It explores themes of fear, the unknown, and the impact of traumatic events, echoing with a sense of unease that lingers long after the attraction has closed its doors.
Story 1. I work as a cemetery operations coordinator, but you can just call me a cemetery manager. Part of my job involves sitting down with visitors and family members of the deceased to assist in setting up funerals and facilitating the sales of burial plots. One day, a man in his early 30s named Antonio, a very spiritual individual, approached me to purchase a burial plot for his ailing father who was in hospice care. Antonio, with a thick Hispanic accent, had a deep sense of compassion that was evident in his eyes. He shared pictures of his father, a kind and gentle-looking man who seemed far too young to be taken away from his family. Sadly, Antonio's father's time came that very week, and Antonio arranged for the funeral service at the cemetery. The day of the funeral was stormy, which many consider a sign of good luck. As the funeral procession briefly stopped in front of the office building, I stepped outside under the awning and saw Antonio in the car following the hearse. We exchanged waves, acknowledging each other's presence. Due to the inclement weather, I returned indoors until the procession was ready to proceed to the burial site. I hopped into one of the cemetery pickup trucks and followed the procession to the final destination, where I stood with my umbrella, ensuring the smooth flow of the funeral service. After the funeral, I took a few rounds around the cemetery in the truck, a routine I performed a couple of times a day. With a pile of paperwork and the task of closing the cemetery that night, I headed back to my desk to attend to my responsibilities. The cemetery's closing time was 5:30, and as darkness approached, I drove around one last time to confirm that all visitors had left. Then I drove to the front gate to lock it. It was an unusually warm early March evening, and the days were still relatively short. On this particular stormy day, it felt like night had already fallen by closing time. As I was driving back to my office, I thought I saw someone hastily walking down one of the paths among the tombstones. They turned and disappeared behind a hedge. In response, I honked my horn to signal that the cemetery was closed. Strangely, I never saw that person again. I grabbed my umbrella and ventured out into the rain, following the path the person had taken. I reached the hedge they had turned behind, and from there I peered down a long row of tombstones on one side and hedges on the other. To my surprise, there was no one in sight. I searched in the rain for a good 20 minutes, but eventually had to give up. Back in the office, I reviewed the CCTV footage. None of it captured any unusual movement, perhaps due to the storm and darkness outside. While multitasking between the camera and my paperwork, I suddenly heard the front door of the visitation room slam shut. Jumped from my chair and called out a greeting, thinking that perhaps it was the same person I had seen earlier, locked inside the cemetery and looking for assistance. I stepped into the lobby, but there was no one there. I called out again, and then I noticed the door to the visitation room had been closed. I started searching all the windows but found nothing. I had no choice but to give up after a thorough search. I drove back to my office, collected my belongings, and locked up. Before leaving, I made one more pass around the cemetery to ensure all visitors had left. Finally, I secured the front gate and drove home. When my wife asked why I was unusually quiet, I simply attributed it to a long day at work. To this day, I'm inclined to believe that my mind was playing tricks on me due to overwork, but the whole experience is still unsettling to think about. Story 2. My name is Jeremy, and this incident occurred in the heart of October during a chilly and windy evening. I reside in a somewhat sizable town characterized by its old and dilapidated early 18th century buildings. One night, my friend and I were seeking some thrill around 3 a.m. We decided to explore a small, eerie cemetery situated about 10 minutes away from my apartment. This cemetery was separated by a highway, occupying about 20 acres of land on both sides. It had a gloomy atmosphere, given its isolation and disrepair. We were intrigued to check out the older part of the cemetery, a section entirely disconnected from the newer area by an old iron fence. The older graves dated back centuries, and it was apparent that no one had visited them in years. After about an hour of wandering around and capturing eerie photographs of the moss-covered graves, we took a break under a massive pecan tree located at the center of the older section. It was then that we heard a young girl's laughter, which seemed unnervingly close to our location. At first, we assumed it might be a toy left on a child's grave, but the sound persisted. While it creeped us out, we continued our exploration. However, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a sensation that lingered throughout our visit. My friend mentioned seeing someone in the shadows of a small wooded area adjacent to the cemetery, and this heightened our unease. As we felt increasingly spooked, we decided to leave and find our way back to the car. But that's when we heard the sound of footsteps crunching on leaves behind us. We quickened our pace and eventually reached the car, which my friend swiftly started. I had never seen him drive so urgently. It seemed as though the eerie laughter was now following us. We arrived at the only gas station open at that hour and checked the back of the car, fearing that something had been placed there to spook us. To our relief, we found nothing, so we hurried back to my apartment. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even after we had left the cemetery. I had a sense of dread that continued to linger in my mind, leaving me uneasy and unable to forget the experience. By Eric Wainwright. Story 3. When I was in my late teens, my friend Sean and I decided to indulge our curiosity and venture into a local cemetery late one October night. We were both seeking a thrill and felt adventurous despite the obvious risks. I'll introduce my friends as Jason and Mark for the purpose of this narration. Jason's place was our rendezvous point, and he lived relatively close to the cemetery. Our initial plan was to explore the cemetery and capture spooky photos on our cameras. We parked Jason's car in a secluded lot across the street from the cemetery entrance, as it was past midnight, and the area was practically deserted. We were confident that no one would witness our little escapade. We hopped over the cemetery's fence, which was relatively easy to scale, and ventured into the gloomy graveyard. The only source of light was the flashlight on our phones, allowing us to see only a few yards ahead. Our separation in the cemetery was intentional, as we were aiming for a more suspenseful experience. While exploring the cemetery, I felt an overwhelming sensation of being watched. I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was observing us from the shadows. My instincts led me to search the surrounding woods, but I found no sign of anyone or anything unusual. As I began to search for Jason and Mark, I heard a loud noise nearby. I immediately turned towards the source of the sound and saw an older man, possibly in his mid-50s, wearing a black raincoat and jeans with a mustache and gray hair. This man screamed at us to leave the cemetery, sending a shiver down my spine. I was overcome by dizziness and, in an instant, everything went dark. The next thing I knew, I was being dragged through the woods. Panicked and disoriented, I realized that it was Jason who had come to my rescue and pulled me out of the cemetery. As I regained consciousness, I felt a sense of urgency, convinced that something or someone was following us. My friends and I ran back to the car, but when I turned to look back, I saw a figure closely trailing us. It was an eerie and unsettling sight. We made it to Jason's car and quickly hopped in. He accelerated before the engine had fully started, narrowly avoiding an accident as we sped away from the cemetery. We were shaken, but we couldn't find any logical explanation for the encounter. Mark and Jason firmly believed that the man in the cemetery was real and that we had stumbled upon an unexpected visitor. However, my perspective was different. I had been the one who initially encountered the figure, and the way he had appeared and vanished was deeply unsettling. Ultimately, the events of that night left us bewildered and apprehensive. We couldn't definitively conclude whether it was a real person or something supernatural, but the experience left an indelible mark on our memories. By 9 Rec. Story 4. During my teenage years, my friends and I made a rather foolish decision. I was around 17 or 18 years old, and it was the month of October. In the spirit of Halloween, I yearned for a thrill and suggested that we sneak into a nearby cemetery. For the purpose of this story, let's call my friends Steve and Dave. We gathered at Steve's house, and he had abstained from drinking. He would be the designated driver for our expedition. The plan was to explore a local cemetery and capture some spooky photos. We parked Steve's car in a desolate lot across the street from the cemetery. It was well past midnight, and the area was devoid of any onlookers. We felt confident that our escapade would go unnoticed. We effortlessly scaled the cemetery's fence, which was only about 3 or 4 feet high, and ventured into the eerie graveyard. The only source of light was the flashlight on our smartphones, allowing us to see only a short distance ahead. To enhance the thrill, we decided to separate and explore different sections of the cemetery. As I began to navigate the cemetery, an overwhelming sensation of being watched crept over me. It felt as though something or someone was lurking in the shadows, observing our every move. My instincts led me to scan the surrounding woods, but I found no trace of anyone or anything unusual. Intent on reuniting with Steve and Dave, I headed in their direction. To capture the eerie ambience, I began recording a video with the flashlight on my phone. It was then that I noticed something unusual on my phone screen. I froze in horror as I saw a woman dressed in a white gown or dress with long gray hair. She was initially gazing down at the ground, but when I looked up, she had vanished. Terrified, I started backing away from the spot, my heart pounding in my chest. Curiosity got the better of me, and I looked back at my phone screen, only to find the woman there again, this time staring directly into the camera. The eerie feeling intensified, and it was clear she was moving closer to me. Panic overtook me, and I began to scream for Steve and Dave while sprinting away from that spot. I couldn't see their lights anywhere, and they didn't respond to my frantic cries. Determined to leave the cemetery, I ran back to the fence and managed to hop over it. Finally, I reached Steve's car and called out to them, urging them to leave immediately. Minutes later, Steve and Dave joined me in the car. We were all visibly shaken. As I showed them the video, they had the same horrified expressions I did. The video revealed the moment the woman slowly lifted her head to look directly at me and began to move closer. Story 5. A few years ago, my beloved grandpa passed away. We were always very close, and on his birthday, which happened to fall in July, I decided to visit his grave at the cemetery. The cemetery he and my grandma had chosen was approximately an hour's drive from my apartment, and my family had already paid their respects earlier in the day. I arrived at the cemetery on a rainy, gloomy day, and the somber atmosphere only added to the melancholy of the occasion. The gatekeeper requested the plot number, which I provided, allowing me to enter the cemetery. It was a reasonably large cemetery, and as I hadn't been there as the driver before, I had difficulty locating my grandpa's grave. The cemetery was almost deserted, which wasn't surprising given the weather. I eventually found my grandpa's headstone, parked my car on the grass nearby, and placed some fresh flowers on the grave. I stood there for a while, closed my eyes, and offered a heartfelt prayer. Upon finishing my prayer, I opened my eyes and glanced around. To my astonishment, I saw an older man standing a few rows away, directly across from me. He was looking right at me, and there was an uncanny familiarity about him. I couldn't believe my eyes, as he appeared to be my grandpa. My heart skipped a beat. But when I looked away and then back at the spot, he had vanished. I was left in a state of disbelief, my skin prickling with goosebumps. Overwhelmed and uneasy, I quickly made my way back to my car, silently whispering my love to my grandpa. I drove away from the cemetery, but my head was pounding, and I couldn't shake the eerie feeling that something unusual had transpired. As I headed home, I experienced a strange headache, which was quite unusual for me. I recalled that I had fainted only once before in my life, and it had happened that night at the cemetery. I didn't understand the cause, but it was a profoundly unsettling experience. Later that night, my phone rang at around 2 a.m. The call came from an unknown number, and my heart raced as I answered it, fearing it might bring distressing news. The call was filled with static, and I could barely make out any words. Yet for a brief half-second, I thought I heard my grandpa's voice amid the crackling. I attempted to respond, but my voice was trembling, and I was too shaken to articulate a coherent response. The call abruptly ended, leaving me with a sense of unease and a racing heart. The next day, I contacted my phone provider to trace the number, but they claimed they lacked the necessary data to do so, which left me with unanswered questions. The events of that day and night were the most unsettling experiences I had ever encountered. I couldn't determine whether my grandpa had attempted to communicate with me or if my overactive imagination was playing tricks on me. Despite the uncertainty, the memory continues to haunt me. We hope you enjoyed those spine-tingling tales as much as we did. If you're still feeling a little spooked, don't worry, you're not alone. But before we say goodbye, we have a few things to ask of you. If you've got a creepy cemetery story of your own, please share it with us in the comments below. We'd love to hear about your experiences and encounters. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you found these stories as chilling as we did. It really helps our channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you haven't already. There are plenty more eerie adventures waiting for you right here, so you don't want to miss out. Share this video with your friends and fellow thrill seekers. After all, spooky stories are best enjoyed with company, right? That's a wrap for today, but stay tuned for more bone-chilling content in the future. Until next time, remember to keep your flashlight handy, your wits about you, and always be ready for the unexpected. Thanks for joining us on this haunting journey. Take care and may your nights be eerily entertaining. See you in the next video. Story 1. The Haunting Voice by Van Van. In a quiet 2-story house shared with my sibling, my sister occupied the lower floor while I claimed the upper level. With my sister often away at her boyfriend's house, I frequently found myself alone, despite being a 30-year-old adult. The evening in question occurred as I sat alone in the spacious living room, engrossed in a scary movie. The open layout of my living space made it a tad unnerving to watch such movies by myself, as my back was exposed to a significant portion of the room. As the dim room's only illumination emanated from the TV, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder repeatedly. Admittedly, I found myself doing so more often than a 30-year-old should. After the movie ended, I prepared for bed and ventured into the hallway to switch off the lights. 2 hours into my slumber, I was abruptly awakened at 1 a.m. by an unfamiliar voice downstairs. The voice resonated like that of my sister, yet it was peculiar since she was supposed to be at her boyfriend's place, which was 20 miles away. Disoriented and alarmed, I headed down the dark hallway toward the kitchen, where her voice persisted, now calling my name. My sister's absence perplexed me, as there was no one downstairs when I switched on the kitchen light. A sense of unease crept in as I ventured into her vacant bedroom, where a mysterious sound caught my attention. Startled, I returned to my room, grasped my phone, and attempted to contact her to no avail. Locked in my room, I pondered whether I had hallucinated the entire event, fearful of an even more unsettling alternative. The experience was inexplicable, as I had never experienced hallucinations or sleep disorders before, leaving me deeply disturbed by the vividness of the encounter. Story 2. Late Night Intrusion by Victor Fodi. During my teenage years, I often found myself alone at home due to my mom's work schedule as an RN. On one fateful night, my mom was working the overnight shift and my older brother was away at college. Left alone, I invited my friend Molly over and we spent the evening watching movies and hanging out. Molly had to leave early due to her parents' strict rules about being out late, and I was left alone to watch TV. I was in my upstairs bedroom, which overlooked our quiet street, and I suddenly heard the distinct sound of one of the chairs on our deck being moved. Alarmed, I peered out of the window, expecting to see Molly. However, what I saw was not her. A stranger sat in one of the deck chairs, and when they noticed me looking, they made eye contact. I immediately retreated from the window, fearful of this unknown person. I sent messages to some friends, suspecting it might be a prank, but they all denied any involvement. My gut told me this was more sinister. After a while, I gathered the courage to look out the window again, only to find the person still there, staring up at my window. Their presence was unsettling, and I hurried to turn off the TV and lights. Huddled on my bed in the dark, I remained still, hoping they would lose interest. However, their persistence was disturbing. I eventually called out to them, asking what they wanted, and their response was chilling. They simply said, "Please come help us." Their laughter and wheezing were unsettling, and the situation escalated when they attempted to enter the house. Fortunately, they gave up at the front door, and I remained locked in my room throughout the night, fearing for my safety. When my mom returned home the next morning, I shared my horrifying experience. Looking back, it's a night I'll never forget, and it taught me the importance of taking safety measures when home alone. Story 3. A Frightening Family Trip by Mr. Fitton. As a young teenager, I experienced one of the most intense and terrifying nights of my life while home alone. Our family consisted of 5 members, and I was the youngest at 10 years old. On a fateful Friday night, my older brother, aged 14, was out with friends, and my little sister, aged 5, was home with me. That evening, my parents received a distressing phone call, causing my mom to burst into tears. I was bewildered and scared, but my mom quickly explained that my brother had been hit by a car. He sustained a broken leg and other injuries. My parents rushed to the hospital, leaving me and my little sister home alone. I was reluctant to visit the hospital, so I stayed home with my sister. The night took a dark turn when I thought I heard someone in our house. I decided to investigate and, to my horror, saw a stranger outside an upstairs window. The woman was not my mom or my sister. She was a complete stranger. Despite my efforts to locate her, the woman vanished. I checked every room and closet in the house, but found no trace of her. My parents' house had a backyard with woods, a deck, and various hiding spots, making it difficult to determine where she had gone. My last resort was to inspect the basement, but I couldn't fathom how she could have reached it. The night passed uneasily as my mind raced with fear and uncertainty. I couldn't sleep and was constantly on edge. Fortunately, my brother recovered from his injuries, but the memory of that night's terror still lingers. Story 4. The Mysterious House Guest by Anonymous. At 23 years old, I still lived with my parents. One day they were both away and I was outside playing basketball in the front yard. Glancing up at one of the upstairs windows, I saw a woman I didn't recognize standing there. It wasn't my mother or sister, it was a stranger. As soon as she noticed me looking at her, she quickly retreated from the window. Concerned, I went inside and began searching the house, room by room, closet by closet. But there was no sign of the mysterious woman. I even checked the basement, though it seemed highly unlikely she could be there. Convinced that she must have left through the back door, which I had unlocked earlier when retrieving my basketball, I locked all the doors and called my parents to inform them of the unsettling encounter. That night I had difficulty falling asleep due to the strange incident. My mind was racing with questions. However, my uneasiness paid off as I was alert when I heard unusual sounds in the middle of the night. These sounds led me to a terrifying discovery. Turning to my other side, I found the same woman emerging from under my bed. In sheer panic, I tackled her and demanded to know who she was. She struggled and scratched me before my neighbor arrived to help. We managed to restrain her and called the police, who recognized her as someone they had dealt with before. This woman, known as Karen, had a history of troubling behavior. Although the incident left me with scars, it also left me with a sense of satisfaction that justice had been served. Story 5. To this day, the memory of those eyeless, pale figures and the mysteries of the secluded cabin linger in my mind. Alex and I had succeeded in banishing the malevolent entities and closing the portal to another realm within the forest. The cabin, once a place of fear and dread, had been restored to its former peace. Over time, the forest reclaimed its serene beauty, and the old cabin served as a reminder of the strange and supernatural. I never ventured back into those woods, content to leave the mysteries undisturbed. The experience had left me with a profound respect for the unknown and a lasting fascination with the supernatural. As the years passed, Alex and I continued our investigations into the supernatural, exploring other enigmatic places and confronting otherworldly phenomena. The knowledge we had gained from our encounter in the cabin was invaluable, and we used it to help others who faced similar hauntings and paranormal experiences. The secluded cabin in the woods became a legend in the local community, a place where the boundary between our world and the otherworldly had been breached and then sealed. It served as a stark reminder of the dangers of tampering with forces beyond human comprehension. Though the eyeless figures had faded into memory, their existence remained a mystery that haunted my thoughts. I knew that the supernatural world was vast and filled with secrets, and I couldn't help but wonder what other enigmas lay hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered by those daring enough to seek them out. And so, the story of the old secluded cabin in the woods came to a close, but it left an indelible mark on my life, a testament to the enduring power of the unknown and the courage to confront it. In the summer of 1978, I arrived in the coastal town of Seaview Harbor, Massachusetts, eager to begin my new job as a lighthouse keeper. The town was picturesque with its cobblestone streets, historic homes, and the majestic Seaview Lighthouse, which stood as a sentinel by the stormy Atlantic. Little did I know that my life would soon be entangled in the mysterious secrets hidden within the lighthouse's walls. My initial days were tranquil, filled with the soothing sound of crashing waves and the charm of a close-knit community. As the keeper of the lighthouse, I took my responsibilities seriously, ensuring that the light always shone brightly to guide ships safely through the treacherous waters. One cloudy afternoon, an elderly woman named Eleanor visited the lighthouse. Her eyes held a distant, haunted look, and she inquired about a book titled The Secrets of Seaview Harbor, which she believed was in my possession. Intrigued, I searched the lighthouse's library but found no such book in their collection. However, I offered to help her find information about the town's history, sensing her need for closure. Eleanor shared a dark tale from Seaview Harbor's past. In 1955, a devastating storm had swept through the town, leaving destruction in its wake. Several lives were lost, and many families were torn apart. Eleanor's own brother, William, had disappeared that fateful night, never to be seen again. She believed the mysterious book held answers about what truly happened. Together, Eleanor and I delved into the lighthouse's archives, uncovering records of the 1955 storm and its aftermath. However, there was no mention of a book titled The Secrets of Seaview Harbor. Instead, we stumbled upon a series of journal entries written by a previous lighthouse keeper, Samuel. These entries alluded to unusual occurrences and an old hidden room within the lighthouse. Samuel had written about whispers in the night, strange lights, and an inexplicable, ever-present fog that descended upon the town. His final entry was filled with a sense of dread, mentioning that he had uncovered a secret within the lighthouse that he couldn't fully comprehend. Determined to uncover the truth, Eleanor and I began exploring the lighthouse. As we climbed its spiral staircase, we could hear faint whispers that seemed to echo from the walls. The sound grew more pronounced as we ascended, and the air became heavy with an eerie tension. We finally reached the top of the lighthouse, where a narrow, hidden passage led to a concealed room. Inside, we found a dusty journal, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and writings. It appeared to be written in an ancient language which we could not decipher. As we examined the journal, the whispers in the lighthouse grew more insistent, echoing the voices of long-lost souls. It was as if the very walls of the lighthouse held the memories of the past, yearning to reveal their secrets. The atmosphere grew unnerving and shadows danced ominously along the walls. Eleanor and I were determined to unveil the lighthouse's hidden history. We contacted a linguist, Dr. Reynolds, who was an expert in ancient languages. Dr. Reynolds deciphered the journal and revealed its chilling contents. It spoke of a pact made by the town's founders with a mysterious, ancient entity in exchange for prosperity and protection from the sea. The entity, known as the Guardian of the Deep, demanded sacrifices to maintain its favor. For years, the town had carried out these dark rituals in secret, using the lighthouse as the focal point of their ceremonies. The storm of 1955 had been a reckoning, and the entity had claimed the lives of those who had broken the pact. As the truth unfolded, the whispers in the lighthouse grew more malevolent, as if the Guardian of the Deep resented the exposure of its secrets. Eleanor and I knew that we had to break the cycle and appease the ancient entity to protect the town from its wrath. We ventured into the heart of the storm, carrying out a ceremony to honor the pact made by Seaview Harbor's founders. As we recited the ancient incantations and offered our own sacrifices, the lighthouse's eerie whispers faded into the tempestuous wind. The storm passed and the sea grew calm. The Guardian of the Deep accepted our tribute, and the town's secret was once again shrouded in the mists of history. Seaview Harbor, with its dark past, would continue to thrive, while the lighthouse's echoes remained a secret known only to a chosen few. My time as a lighthouse keeper continued, but the echoes of that mysterious encounter never left me. The town's secrets were preserved, and the lighthouse stood as a silent sentinel to a past veiled in darkness.